Welcome, everyone. This is our first Hackberry Hollow podcast. I am Glenn Moyes.
I'm Adam Weber.
Yep. So now you are familiar with our voices.
Yes. I'm the annoying-sounding one.
Yeah. Okay, so one of the reasons why we're doing this podcast, actually the main reason why we're doing this podcast, is to try something new and to see if we could do it. So we've been, it's been more than a year since we've been posting like just, concept art or maybe a few little, articles on the blog. But we figured why not do a podcast? Because Adam and I actually spend hours upon hours on Skype talking about the story. In fact, we are very familiar with Skype's, which we've been calling the 613 bug, which means that it's a Skype call goes 6 hours and 13 minutes over, we will start to hear an echo. Like for some reason, the echo cancellation stops working on my end.
And it gets really, really scary when we encounter that bug multiple times in one day because we've been working on Hackberry Hollow for so many hours.
For over 12 hours.
Yes.
Yeah.
12 and a half hours.
Yeah. So, but anyway, so we figured, let's do a podcast and kind of, talk about, where we're at. One of the things that I feel pretty strongly about, and, just to kind of back up a little bit, when I was at college and I started teaching Blender workshops, Blender 3D software, I realized that one of the problems that people have with teaching is that they've forgotten how they learned something. And of course, I was doing their art program and graphic design and things like that. And I was reading a bunch of books on how to draw, people, like comic book drawing and things like that. And they, it would say, okay, here's how you're supposed to draw a leg. This is how you're supposed to draw a nose. But they didn't explain how they got to that point of, this is why I've been drawing legs this way. This is why I've been drawing noses this way. This is why my marks on paper work better than your marks on paper. And part of that is because they've just forgotten their learning process, because they've been learning for, like a decade, and you've just forgotten how you got to that point. So it's difficult to communicate with people who are in the middle of learning how you figured out all this stuff. Like, what was the key ingredient to, okay, when did you finally figure out, how to draw the human body from memory? What was the breakthrough? And they just don't remember. Which is why I think the Structure of Man series, I'm just going to go ahead and plug that. That's at alienthink.com. If that series is really successful because he kind of created his own process of how you learned. So one of the things we've been doing with Hackberry Hollow, and I'm sure all of the projects that we do from now on, is to keep a production journal. Whenever we realize something or some theory ends up working really, really well when applied to our story, we write that down so we can remember all these little breakthroughs that we had. Everything that we learned, a lot of the decisions that we made in the story, we can have recorded so we can remember how we learned how to do this. Because otherwise we're just going to be like, it was a lot of hard work and that was the key ingredient.
Yeah, we just kind of put hours and hours and hours into it. The fear is that if people look at our thing, and if we don't record this and or keep track of everything that we did, then when somebody else comes and asks us, well, how did you do this? Well, we just put in hours of work, and we put in over 12-hour days writing. And so then they sit down and try to write their own story and then just sit there and go, what did you do for all that time?
Yeah. Oh, we can tell them what we did for a lot of that time.
Oh, yeah.
Let's see, what is it like? Well, this isn't the way anymore because we've actually buckled down and stopped this. But previously, I think a third of our time was tangents.
Yeah. My theory is that, tangents kind of follow a curve, but a secant goes wherever it wants.
Yeah.
And so we've had quite a number of secants.
Yeah. And a lot of times those are necessary because when you, especially with Hackberry Hollow, where we are creating this whole world, and we need to make it needs to be believable. So we just start talking about just all kinds of crazy stuff.
All kinds of things that apply to the world. One of the things that I've really been into, I've been writing stories since I was a really little kid. And over the years, I've been developing a very large mass of theories on what it actually takes to make a good story. And one thing that I was really happy about with Glenn was that he had his own list of theories, and a lot of them matched mine. And so one of the things that was a major goal for Hackberry Hollow was we wanted to apply these theories and see if they actually work. Hey, let's see if we can actually do this, actually make a story that follows these. And then if we can even pull it off, will people actually like it? Are the theories correct? But Glenn was teasing earlier about how they're actually hypotheses, and we're kind of we're just guessing. And one of the big theories, the one that I kind of started on, is I call it my Bible that I actually read, is that you can't please everyone. If you're going to make a story, you can't write one that everyone's going to enjoy. And remember, like Hollywood tends to hold to the fact that you need to have as wide of an audience as possible. In fact, the book Save the Cat is a very popular screenwriting book, and that's a big theme in there, is as wide of an audience as possible. Your story has to have a love interest. It has to have, this, and this. And from my perspective, I've noticed that there are a lot of stories out there that just focus on a very specific audience, and the people that enjoy those stories just absolutely go nuts over them. And so one of the things that that we're starting on, our foundation, is make our audience as happy as possible. And so then from there, what are the things that we want to see in a story? So this story is lengthy, it's episodic content, and so we felt like one of the big things that we would really like to see is a story written completely in advance. No retcon whatsoever, retroactive continuity. And that has saved our bacon so many times it's not even funny.
It is not even funny how much it saved our bacon. Oh my goodness. Didn't we go back and completely rewrite chapter 1 like twice?
Twice. Yeah. Yeah, we redid chapter 1 multiple times. I remember we were doing, what was it, chapter 12, and then going back and adding things to chapters 2 and 3 that it's like, oh crap, we forgot to mention this. And oh man, the audience is going to get confused when they reach this line. It's all the perspective of the audience. What is the audience going to experience? And we've already, like, as far as we are right now, I think that theory is very sound, because I could just imagine if we had to retcon all those things, it would be very hard to convince people. Oh yeah, we really did plan from the beginning, but we didn't do a good job. That also gives us time to have a test audience read over our chapters. Like, as of this recording, we have 16 chapters written, at least current drafts of those chapters. All of them are subject to change at this point, and they'll probably continue to have tweaks done to them up until we actually produce the real comic.
Yeah, but so far, it doesn't seem like a whole lot of tweaks have actually needed to be made. And actually fairly recently, we just barely finished volume 1, and that took a lot of time to go through, because as we were writing the script, we realized how much stuff, and we'll get into process later, but how much stuff in our outline actually wasn't working.
Yeah.
So we spent I think 2 weeks straight just working out the plot holes and
without any script writing at all. We were just going around on the outline.
Yeah, and now we're back to it, and we've been doing let's see, last week we did 3 chapters. I think this week we might do 3 chapters, but definitely 2.5.
Yeah, I think 2.5 is more likely. Then, of course, there's the suspension of disbelief. And I've actually gotten a little bit of flack over this one, because our story features a taxidermist. And I've been going around and talking to taxidermists and trying to figure out, okay, how exactly do you do this? And one thing that I was kind of surprised by some people who are into taxidermy and finding out, it's like you're trying to learn about taxidermy, but you have no intention of being a taxidermist, and they were kind of hostile to the idea. But I think a few people kind of warmed up to it after I explained this. If you have a story, especially one with ours that has things that are pretend, like magic, for example, anything in there that does exist in real life, anything that's real, has to be as real as possible so that you can have confidence in the things that are made up. So that has to do with everything from, how government works, how all the technologies that exist in their work, how is taxidermy done, what else? We've done research into factories, into robotics.
Cargo shipping and...
cargo shipping.
Oh, man. That was fascinating, actually.
Everything down to the identification numbers on the cargo ship containers. The amount of detail that we've got in everything is quite extensive. But to do that, I mean, most of the audience probably won't even notice that kind of detail. I mean, who's going to look at the cargo ship containers and say, oh, that number's not formatted right? But the point is that when it is that detailed and it has that level of realism, then when you get to things like the magic, all of a sudden you can have a suspension of disbelief. If you have to suspend disbelief on too many things, especially on things that do exist in real life, you go out to the real world and see this is different from the way it is in, say, Hackberry Hollow. All of a sudden, a lot of the tension is lost. And then, of course, that brings me back to magic itself. When you have a magic system, and I would expand that to say sci-fi technology counts as a magic system. It's the same thing. You have to be extremely consistent. And what the magic can't do is almost more important than what it can. So that means that you can't suddenly pull random magic spells out of a hat whenever your character gets in a pickle. Here, let's use this never before mentioned spell that would have been really useful in the last chapter. As soon as you do that, that's another thing that tension is gone, because you know that a character can just all of a sudden use a spell that the author has never seen fit to tell you about, probably because they haven't thought of it yet. And so they get into a situation and they might not get back out.